In downtown Manhattan, smoke billows from the 42nd floor of Sterling Enterprises. While others flee, veteran firefighter Jack Morrison charges into the inferno. Despite facing foreclosure on his home and struggling to support his family on a firefighter's salary, Jack never hesitates. Through the thick smoke, he finds CEO Sarah Sterling, the woman whose cost-cutting policies once threatened his station's funding, unconscious near her desk. With his oxygen running low, Jack carries her to safety, only to collapse the moment she's secure. Security cameras capture what happens next. The usually polished CEO, still coughing from smoke, breaks protocol to perform CPR on Jack herself. But why would a powerful executive risk everything for a man she once dismissed as just another budget line item? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The mortgage notice lay unopened on Jack Morrison's kitchen counter, its crisp white envelope a stark contrast to the worn linoleum. He'd recognized that official letterhead anywhere. It had been showing up with increasing frequency over the past 6 months. But at 5:30 a.m., with the familiar weight of his firefighters, uniform on his shoulders, Jack had more immediate concerns. "Daddy, can you help me with my science project later?" 10-year-old Emma's voice carried from the tiny breakfast nook, where she sat surrounded by construction paper and glue sticks. Her mother, Sarah, was already at work. The night shift at the hospital kept their family afloat. Barely. "Of course, sweetheart." Jack kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo. "Mrs. Rodriguez will pick you up after school, okay? Mom and I both work late tonight." The guilt was a constant companion these days. Between his shifts at the firehouse and Sarah's hospital schedule, they relied heavily on neighbors' help with Emma. But the alternative, defaulting on their mortgage, wasn't an option, not with Emma's college fund already emptied to cover last year's property taxes. At the firehouse, the morning light painted long shadows across Engine 57's gleaming red surface. Jack ran his hand along the truck's side, a ritual 25. Years in the making. The cool metal under his palm scented him as it had since his first day on the job. "Morning, Cap." Rookie firefighter Miguel Santos bounded through the garage doors, energy radiating from his young face. At 24, he reminded Jack of himself all those years ago, before mortgages and school fees had tempered his enthusiasm with reality's sharp edges. "You're early, Santos." Jack smiled, gesturing toward the coffee maker. "Help me get this place ready for shift change." As they worked through the morning checklist, Jack watched Miguel's methodical movements. The kid was good, natural instincts, paired with a willingness to learn. "You did well on that warehouse call yesterday," Jack offered. "But remember, check my oxygen levels twice, not once," Miguel finished with a grin. "I know, Cap. You've only told me about 50 times. Make it 51. Jack's tone was light, but his eyes were serious. "This job forgives a lot of mistakes, but oxygen management isn't one of them. One miscalculation—" He stopped. Memories of fallen colleagues weighing heavy on his tongue. The rest of the crew filtered in as the morning progressed. Jack watched them move through their routines, checking equipment, swapping stories, sharing the comfortable camaraderie that came from trusting each other with their lives. These were his people, his second family. During equipment checks, Jack found himself in front of the station's bulletin board. Among the safety notices and shift schedules, a new memo caught his eye. "Budget review meeting. All department heads required." His stomach tightened. The last review had cut their training. Budget by 15%. They were already running lean. Any more cuts would start affecting response times. "Hey, Cap?" It was Lisa Chen, their newest paramedic. "Got a minute?" Jack turned, grateful for the distraction. "What's on your mind?" "That family from last week's apartment fire. The Hendersons. I checked on them at the hospital." Lisa's voice dropped. "Insurance won't cover all the medical bills. They're talking about selling their house." Another family facing the same cliff edge he was teetering on. Jack's hand instinctively moved to his pocket, where his wallet held exactly $23, all that remained until next payday. "Pass around the donation box at dinner, whatever we can spare." The morning alarm caught them mid-conversation. "Engine 57, ladder 24, respond to structural fire, 1242 Pine Street." The dispatcher's voice crackled through the speakers, sending the station into controlled chaos. As Jack swung into the truck's cab, he caught sight of the station's motto painted above the bay doors: "Others first." Some days, those words felt like a promise. Other days, like today, they felt like a reminder of everything he couldn't give his own family. The siren's wail cleared their path through morning traffic. Jack's mind shifted into operational mode, but that unopened envelope on his counter nagged at the edges of his consciousness. He'd have to face it eventually, but right now, someone else's emergency took precedence. It always did. For now, he was Captain Jack Morrison, head of Engine 57, responsible for his crew and their mission. The weight of his personal burdens would have to wait. The city needed its firefighters, even the ones who were quietly drowning in debt. Sarah Sterling's heels clicked against the marble floors of Sterling Enterprises' executive floor, each step echoing with practiced authority. At 48, she'd mastered the art of commanding attention without seeking it. Her tailored charcoal suit and perfectly styled silver-streaked hair were part of a carefully cultivated image, one that had taken 20 years to perfect. The morning sun caught the edge of her father's portrait as she passed. Richard Sterling's stern face watched over the corridor leading to the boardroom, a constant reminder of legacy and expectation. "Profit isn't just about numbers," he'd told her countless times. "It's about making the hard decisions others won't." Her executive assistant, David, fell into step beside her, tablet in hand. Morning briefings ready. The quarterly reports came in early. "Phillips wants to discuss the municipal services review before the full board meeting." Sarah suppressed a sigh. James Phillips, her CFO, had been pushing for aggressive cost-cutting measures across all divisions. His latest target, the company's contributions to city services. "Send the reports to my tablet, and David, hold my calls until after the board meeting." The executive conference room buzzed with morning energy. 8 members of her senior team looked up as she entered, their faces a mix of respect and wariness. These morning briefings had become increasingly tense as profit margins tightened. "Good morning." Sarah settled into her chair, noting the thick stack of reports centered on the mahogany table. "Let's start with Phillips." James Phillips straightened his tie, a gesture Sarah had come to recognize as his preparation for battle. "The municipal services review is complete. Our annual contributions to city services are running 30% above industry standard. The fire department allocation alone..." "The fire department allocation was my father's initiative," Sarah interrupted, her voice level. "He believed in community investment. With all due respect, Sarah, your father didn't face today's market pressures." Phillips tapped his tablet, projecting a graph onto the wall screen. "We're looking at a potential 15% drop in quarterly profits if we don't make significant adjustments. The fire department contribution is low-hanging fruit." Sarah studied the numbers scrolling across her screen. The analysis was thorough, she had to admit. Each percentage point represented millions in potential savings. Her father's voice echoed. In her memory, hard decisions. "What's the public relations impact?" she asked, turning to Miranda Chen, her head of communications. Miranda's expression was carefully neutral. "We'd need to manage the narrative carefully. Position it as resource optimization rather than reduction. But there will be pushback, especially from the unions." The discussion continued, voices rising and falling around the table as departments defended their budgets and suggested cuts elsewhere. Sarah let them talk, her mind working through scenarios. The fire department contribution had been more than financial support. It was a symbol of Sterling Enterprises' commitment to the community. Her father had understood that. But her father hadn't faced shareholders like today's, hungry for quarterly returns and quick to punish any perceived weakness. The market had changed. Perhaps he would have made different decisions in this climate. "We'll review the full proposal at the board meeting," Sarah announced, cutting through the debate. "Phillips, prepare a detailed implementation timeline. Miranda, draft a communication strategy. We'll need to handle this delicately." As the team filed out, Sarah remained seated, staring at the numbers still glowing on her tablet. Something about this decision felt different from the usual cost-cutting measures. The fire department wasn't just another line item. It was people, real people who put their lives on the line every day. David appeared at her elbow with fresh coffee. "Your father's old friend called again. Chief Roberts from Station 57? Sarah's hand paused halfway to the cup. Station 57, the main beneficiary of Sterling Enterprises' fire department funding. What did he want? To discuss the rumors. About the budget cuts. He mentioned something about response times being affected. Of course he had. The old guard, still clinging to her father's way of doing things. Tell him I'll review his concerns after the board meeting. She wouldn't avoid the difficult conversations, but they could wait until decisions were final. The rest of her morning disappeared into a blur of meetings and calls. By lunch, her desk had accumulated 3 more urgent reports and 5 requests for her time. The life of a CEO was a constant balance of priorities, each decision rippling out to affect countless lives. Sarah found herself at her office window, looking down at the city spread out below. Somewhere out there, fire stations were running. Drills responding to calls, saving lives, just like they had when her father first pledged Sterling Enterprises' support, handshaking with Chief Roberts while cameras flashed. "Your 2 o'clock board meeting is ready," David's voice came through the intercom. "And Sarah, the final impact assessment for the fire department cuts just came in." She straightened her jacket, checking her reflection in the window. The woman, looking back at her, was every inch the CEO her father had groomed her to be. Professional, decisive, uncompromising when necessary. But as she gathered her materials for the board meeting, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that today's decisions would cost more than just dollars and cents. Some prices couldn't be measured in quarterly reports or shareholder dividends. Hard decisions, she murmured to herself, squaring her shoulders as she headed for the boardroom. The portrait of her father watched her pass, his painted eyes holding the same question that nagged at her conscience. At what point did smart business decisions become something else entirely? The boardroom of Sterling Enterprises hummed with tension as Sarah Sterling prepared to deliver the news that would reshape the company's relationship with the city. 12 board members sat around the massive oak table, their expressions ranging from anticipation to carefully masked concern. "The municipal services review is complete," Sarah began, her voice steady despite the weight in her chest. "As you'll see in the reports before you, we've identified several areas for immediate cost optimization through the floor to ceiling. Windows, Manhattan's skyline stretched endlessly, a testament to corporate ambition and progress. The same progress that now demanded difficult choices. Our most significant adjustment will be to our fire department funding program." Sarah watched her father's oldest friend, board member William Chen, stiffen slightly. The current allocation. A sharp crack interrupted her presentation, followed by the distinct sound of breaking glass several floors below. The building's fire alarm blared to life, its harsh tone cutting through the corporate stillness. "Just a drill," Phillips suggested, but Sarah was already on her feet. The building's safety protocols were clear. No unannounced drills during board meetings. David burst through the door, his usual composure shattered. "Fire on 42, the server room, it's spreading fast." The evacuation began immediately, but Sarah lingered, gathering crucial documents. "Miss Sterling, we need to go now." Security Chief Martinez insisted, his radio crackling with urgent communications. The smell of smoke reached them before they'd gone 10 steps down the emergency. Stairwell. 42's stairs are compromised, a voice crackled over Martinez's radio. Heavy smoke in the east stairwell. They descended through growing chaos, passing floors where confused employees streamed into the stairwells. The smoke thickened with each level, and Sarah could feel the heat building. By the 38th floor, breathing became difficult. Structure fire, Sterling Enterprises, 42nd floor. The dispatch call crackled through the radio at engine 57. Jack Morrison was already moving, his team falling into practiced formation behind him. Multiple persons reported still inside, heavy smoke showing. The morning's financial worries evaporated as Jack focused on the immediate crisis. Santos, Chen, you're with me. Roberts, take the second team up the east side, standard sweep pattern. There, engines screamed through Manhattan streets, other units converging from different directions. Jack's mind was already mapping the building's layout. He'd done inspections there just last month, before the latest round of budget discussions had stalled. The scene that greeted them was professionally concerning. Thick, black smoke poured from multiple windows on the 42nd floor, with significant spread visible to adjacent levels. Building security met them at the entrance, providing critical updates. Most people are out, the chief of security reported, coughing, but we've lost contact with several executives who were in a board meeting. The smart elevator system's malfunctioning. Some cars are stuck. Jack absorbed the information while his team connected to the building's water supply. Santos, get your oxygen checked twice. The rookie nodded, double-checking his equipment with shaking hands. Inside, the smoke grew denser. With each floor they climbed, emergency lights cast eerie shadows through the haze, and the heat was building ominously. Jack's experience told him this fire was behaving unusually, too hot, too fast. Chief, Lisa's voice crackled through his radio. We've got people trapped in the east stairwell, 39th floor. Heavy smoke conditions. Roberts, redirect to 39, Jack commanded. We'll continue up for the board members. His oxygen meter showed plenty of reserves, but something about the smoke's color concerned him. Server room fires could release toxic chemicals. They found the first group of executives on 41, huddled in a relatively clear conference room. Through the west stairwell, Jack directed them, ensuring Santos guided them safely. But when they reached 42, the situation deteriorated rapidly. The floor's security doors had malfunctioned, requiring precious minutes and equipment to breach. The heat was intense enough to feel through their protective gear. Captain, Santos called out, his voice tight with concern, these doors are hot, really hot. Stay close to the wall, Jack instructed, his experienced eye noting the way smoke curled near the ceiling. Floors compromised. Step only where I step. They found the boardroom empty, chairs hastily pushed back from the table. But a sound, faint coughing, drew Jack's attention to the adjacent executive office. Sarah Sterling lay crumpled near her desk, an oversized binder clutched to her chest. The irony wasn't lost on Jack. The woman who'd been reviewing his department's budget cuts now depended on that same department for her life. Ma'am, he knelt beside her, checking her vitals. I'm Captain Morrison. We're getting you out of here. Her eyes fluttered open, recognition flickering briefly before another coughing fit overtook her. The path back was treacherous. Sections of ceiling had begun to collapse, and the smoke was nearly blinding. Jack's oxygen gauge blinked a warning. The toxic atmosphere was consuming his air supply faster than normal. Sarah was barely conscious, her slight frame a dead weight in his arms. Each step had to be carefully chosen, each breath measured. Behind him, Santos helped guide their path with occasional words of warning about debris. They were 4 floors from safety when Jack's oxygen alarm sounded its final warning. The sound, it pierced through the fire's roar, a clear reminder of his dwindling lifeline. Protocol dictated an immediate retreat. protocol didn't account for having the city's most prominent CEO unconscious in your arms. Santos, Jack's voice was hoarse even, through his mask. Take point, we're getting out now. The last few floors passed in a blur of determination and depleting oxygen. Jack's vision began to narrow, his lungs burning despite the mask. But he couldn't stop. Not when they were so close. They burst through the lobby doors into blinding daylight. Jack's legs carried him several more steps, just far enough to ensure Sarah was clear of the building. He saw paramedics running toward them, their faces showing professional concern. Then his knees buckled. The last thing he registered was the weight lifting from his arms as his world faded to black, his oxygen-starved body finally surrendering to unconsciousness. The gathered crowd watched in stunned silence as Sarah Sterling, still coughing and disoriented, broke away from the paramedics. Without hesitation, she dropped to her knees beside the fallen firefighter, her expensive suit collecting dirt and ash as she began chest compressions. "Come on, Captain," she muttered between counts, her corporate poise replaced by raw determination. "Don't you dare die saving me." The scene, captured by dozens of phones and security cameras, would soon be viral. A CEO performing CPR on the very firefighter whose budget she'd been preparing to cut. But in that moment, there were no budgets, no quarterly reports, no bottom lines. There was only the sound of Sarah Sterling counting compressions, waiting for the paramedics to reach them, refusing to let go of the man who'd risked everything to save her. The world inside a burning building exists in shades of grey and orange, where visibility extends only as far as an outstretched hand. Jack Morrison knew this world intimately, had lived in it for 25 years, but something about this fire felt different. The smoke was thicker, darker, carrying the acrid smell of burning electronics and melting plastic from the server room. His oxygen meter blinked steadily on his mask's heads-up display, 72% remaining. In the murky darkness, that small green number was as important as a heartbeat. Jack had seen too many good firefighters lose track of their oxygen levels in situations like this, their focus consumed by the urgent need to reach those still trapped inside. "Santos, sound off," Jack commanded through his radio, keeping track of his rookie's position. "Right behind you, Cap. Visibility 0, holding the guide rope." Miguel's voice was steady, but Jack could hear the underlying tension. This was the kids' first major high-rise fire. They moved methodically through the 42nd floor, sweeping each room according to protocol. The heat was intense enough to make their protective gear crackle, and occasional crashes echoed through the smoke as ceiling tiles succumbed to the fire's appetite. Jack's oxygen meter clicked down another percentage point, 71%, each breath drawn. Through his mask was measured, controlled. An old instructor's voice echoed in his memory. "Panic breathing kills more firefighters than fire itself." The floor's layout was familiar from previous inspections, but the fire had transformed it into a maze of smoke and shadow. Office furniture loomed like dark sentinels in the haze. A desk chair, knocked over in someone's hasty evacuation, caught Jack's boot, nearly sending him sprawling. "Watch your step," he warned Santos. "Floor's getting cluttered." His oxygen meter ticked down again, 70%. The display seemed to pulse more insistently now, as if sensing its own diminishing reserves. They found the boardroom empty, its long table still littered with papers and abandoned laptops. The heat had caused one of the floor-to-ceiling windows to crack, creating a spider's web pattern in the reinforced glass. Beyond it, Manhattan stretched out in surreal clarity, a bright world separated from their smoke-filled reality by mere inches of failing glass. A sound caught Jack's attention, faint but distinct, coughing. "This way," he gestured to Santos, moving toward the executive offices. The smoke was denser here, rolling along the ceiling in thick waves. Jack's thermal imaging camera showed hot spots spreading through the walls. They didn't have much time. His oxygen meter blinked again. 65%. The toxic smoke was consuming his air supply faster than normal. Each breath felt a little shorter than the last. The first office was empty, so was the second. But in the third, the corner office, with its commanding view of the city, Jack's thermal camera picked up a heat signature. A figure slumped near. The massive desk, barely moving. Sarah Sterling lay curled on her side, one arm stretched toward an overturned water bottle that had rolled just out of reach. The sight struck Jack with unexpected force. Here was the powerful CEO, reduced to the same human vulnerability as anyone else in the face of fire and smoke. "Ma'am," he knelt beside her, checking her pulse. It was rapid but strong. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, struggling to focus. Recognition flickered across her face, not of Jack personally, but of what he represented. Safety, rescue, hope. "My files," she managed between coughs, gesturing weakly toward her desk. "Leave them," Jack ordered, already assessing the best. "Way to carry her." His oxygen meter caught his eye again. 60%. The numbers were dropping faster now, the toxic atmosphere hungry for his remaining air. He lifted her as gently as the situation allowed, noting how light she felt despite her commanding presence in board meetings and press conferences. Santos appeared at his side, ready to help guide them back through the smoke-filled maze. "Stay close," Jack instructed, both to Santos and to the semi-conscious woman in his arms. "We're getting out of here." The journey back was a nightmare of navigation and endurance. The fire had spread, forcing them to find alternate routes. Sections of ceiling collapsed behind them, the building groaning as its structure was tested by heat and flame. Jack's oxygen meter continued its relentless countdown. 55%, 50%, 45%. Each step became a careful calculation of necessity and remaining air. Sarah Sterling's breathing was growing more labored against his chest, her expensive suit now soaked with sweat and grime. "Cap!" Santos's voice crackled through the radio, tight with concern. "East stairwell's blocked. We need to redirect." Jack's mind raced through the building's layout. The west stairwell meant a longer route, more precious oxygen consumed. But they had no choice. 30% oxygen remaining. They encountered other firefighters helping the last evacuees, their flashlight beams cutting through the smoke like solid things. Jack passed them with brief nods, conserving his breath. Every step counted. Now 135% oxygen. The stairwell was a vertical tunnel of heat and shadow. Jack's muscles burned with the effort of carrying Sarah's limp form down flight after flight. Santos stayed close, occasionally steadying them both when debris made the steps treacherous. Percent oxygen. Warning light flashing. "Almost there," Jack muttered, though he wasn't sure if he was reassuring Sarah, Santos, or himself. His vision had started to narrow, darkness creeping in at the edges. 5% oxygen. Critical warning. The lobby appeared through the smoke like a mirage, its marble floors reflecting emergency lights in a dizzying pattern. Jack's legs moved on autopilot now, running on determination and training rather than strength. 20% oxygen. Alarm sounding. Daylight beckoned through the glass doors. Jack forced himself forward, each step a monumental effort. Sarah Sterling stirred slightly in his arms, a small cough escaping her. 50% oxygen. Critical system failure imminent. The cool outside air hit them like a physical force. Jack managed 3 more steps, making sure they were clear of the building's entrance. He saw paramedics running toward them, their faces showing professional. Concerned. 10% oxygen. Emergency protocols engaging. His arms were impossibly heavy. He felt Sarah's weight being lifted away. Saw her being guided toward a waiting ambulance. Percent oxygen. The world tilted sideways. Jack's last conscious thought was of Emma's science project, still waiting on the kitchen table at home. Then darkness claimed him, and the hero who had saved Sarah Sterling collapsed onto the concrete, his oxygen meter flashing its final warning to an unconscious man. The crowd gathered behind the police barricades held their phones high, documenting what would become the most viral moment in Sterling Enterprises history. News vans had already arrived, their satellite dishes extended toward the sky like mechanical flowers seeking light. Among the onlookers, a young intern from the PR department, Jessica Chen, found herself perfectly positioned to capture what happened next. Through her phone's screen, Jessica watched Captain Morrison emerge from the smoke-filled entrance, Sarah Sterling cradled in his arms. The CEO's tailored suit was almost unrecognizable, stained with soot and water. The firefighters' movements were determined but increasingly unsteady, each step appearing to cost him more than the last. "He's going to fall," someone in the crowd murmured, and Jessica's finger instinctively pressed the record button on her phone. The paramedics were already moving, reading the situation with professional clarity, but they weren't quite fast enough to prevent what happened next from being captured by dozens of cameras. Jack Morrison's legs buckled just as they reached him. In what would later be described as a moment of profound role reversal by the evening news, Sarah Sterling rolled from his failing grip and immediately turned to catch him, her corporate polish forgotten as she helped ease his unconscious form to the ground. "He's not breathing," Sarah's voice carried clearly in the suddenly hushed crowd. Without hesitation she began CPR, her silver-streaked hair falling forward as she counted compressions. "Someone get these straps off his mask." Lisa Chen, the paramedic from Jack's own station, reached them first. "Miss Sterling, we can take over." "Not yet," Sarah snapped, continuing compressions with surprising technique. "Just get his mask off and give him oxygen. Now!" The gathered crowd watched in stunned silence as the CEO of Sterling Enterprises, a woman known for boardroom ruthlessness and billion-dollar decisions, performed CPR on a firefighter with textbook precision. Her counting was steady, her movements assured, though her voice carried an edge of desperate determination. "Come on, Captain," she muttered between breaths. "Don't you dare die saving me." Jessica Chen's video captured it all. The way Sarah's hands never faltered, how she barked orders at approaching medical personnel with the same authority she used in board meetings, the moment she finally allowed the paramedics to take over. Only after Jack's chest began to rise and fall on its own. As they loaded Jack onto a stretcher, Sarah remained by his side, her hand gripping his arm. The expensive Rolex on her wrist glinted through the soot stains, a jarring reminder of the worlds that had just collided. "I'm riding with him," she informed, rather than ask the paramedics, her tone brooking no argument. Before climbing into the ambulance, she turned to her shaken security chief. "Martinez, call David, tell him to reschedule the board meeting and—" She paused, looking back at the unconscious firefighter. "And get me everything we have on the fire department funding." "Review everything." The ambulance doors closed on an image that would dominate social media for weeks. Sarah Sterling, still in her ash-covered suit, holding an oxygen mask to Jack Morrison's face while paramedics worked around her. In the growing crowd, phones buzzed, with notifications as Jessica's video began to spread. Local news crews went live, their reporters gesturing at the smoke still billowing from the upper floors while describing the incredible scene they'd just witnessed. "The question on everyone's mind," one reporter intoned gravely into her microphone, "is why Sarah Sterling, known for her strict adherence to corporate protocol, would break every rule to personally perform CPR on a firefighter." Sources inside Sterling Enterprises have confirmed that just moments before the fire, Sterling was preparing to announce significant cuts to the company's fire department funding program. The irony wasn't lost on the gathering. A crowd, snippets of conversation floated through the morning air. "Didn't she just vote to reduce their budget? I heard she was going to cut their funding completely. My cousin works at Sterling, says she's never seen the CEO lose her cool like that." Miguel Santos, still catching his breath after emerging from the building, found himself surrounded by reporters eager for details. The rookie firefighter looked overwhelmed until Lisa Chen appeared at his side, steering him away from the cameras. "No, in comments right now," Lisa announced firmly. "We have a job to finish here." Indeed, while the drama of Jack's rescue had captured public attention, the fire still raged above. Other crews continued to battle the blaze, their work now complicated by water-damaged floors and unstable ceilings. But the story had already taken on a life of its own. By noon, Just Sterling CEO was trending on social media, accompanied by clips of Sarah performing CPR with grim determination. Public relations experts were already calling it either a PR miracle or nightmare, depending on their perspective. In the midst of the chaos, Jessica Chen reviewed the video on her phone one more time before uploading it. The moment felt significant somehow, not just as breaking news, but as something more profound. Something about seeing Sarah Sterling on her knees, counting compressions with the same precision she usually reserved for profit margins, had transformed the narrative entirely. The final shot of her video showed Sarah in the ambulance doorway, her typically perfect hair disheveled, her expression far from its usual controlled mask. For a brief moment, she looked directly into Jessica's camera, and in her eyes was something that would spark endless discussion in the days to come. Raw, unfiltered human emotion from a woman known for her impenetrable corporate facade. As the ambulance pulled away, its sirens cutting through the morning air, the gathered crowd began to disperse. But the story was just beginning. In boardrooms and firehouses across the city, people were already asking the same question. What would this mean for Sterling Enterprises' relationship with the fire department? And in the ambulance, speeding through Manhattan streets, Sarah Sterling found herself still counting. Not budget numbers or profit margins, but the steady beeps of Jack Morrison's heart monitor. Each one a reminder of the man who had risked everything to save her, and the decision she now faced about how to repay that debt. Mount Sinai Hospital's VIP wing wasn't accustomed to hosting firefighters. The private waiting room, usually reserved for celebrities and corporate executives, now held an unusual mix of visitors. Ash-covered firefighters from Station 57, hospital administrators hovering uncertainly, and in the center of it all, Sarah Sterling, still in her soot-stained suit. The admission records on the nurse's tablet told two intertwining stories. In room 1042, Morrison Jack, smoke inhalation, oxygen deprivation, minor burns. In room 1044, Sterling Sarah, smoke inhalation, minor contusions. The nurses had tried to convince Sarah to rest in her own room, but she'd refused to leave. The waiting area outside Jack's unit. "Miss Sterling," a nurse approached cautiously. "Your private room is ready." "I'm fine here," Sarah cut her off, her voice hoarse from smoke and emotion. Her fingers absently traced the oxygen tube running beneath her nose, but her eyes never left Jack's door. The sound of running footsteps drew everyone's attention. A woman in hospital scrubs burst into the waiting room, her face pale with worry. Behind her, a young girl clutched a half-finished science project. "Where is he?" Jack's wife Sarah, the other Sarah, as the nurses had begun calling her, demanded. "Where's my husband?" The CEO of Sterling Enterprises stood slowly, suddenly, uncertain. This was Jack's family, the people who knew him not as a budget line or a heroic firefighter, but as a husband, a father, a provider. "Mrs. Morrison," Sarah Sterling stepped forward. "Your husband is stable. The doctors are—" "You," Sarah Morrison's voice cracked with recognition. "You're the one he saved, the one cutting the fire department's funding." The silence in the waiting room grew heavy. The firefighters from Station 57 shifted uncomfortably, while hospital staff searched for somewhere else to look. Little Emma Morrison looked between the two women, clutching her science project closer. "Did Daddy save you?" Sarah Sterling felt the weight of every eye in the room. In boardrooms, she commanded attention effortlessly. But here, facing a 10-year-old girl whose father lay unconscious because of her, words failed her. "Yes," she finally managed, kneeling to meet Emma's eyes. "Your daddy is the bravest man I've ever met. He carried me out when I couldn't walk, even though his oxygen was running out." "Did you help him too?" Emma asked, pointing to the viral video playing silently on a nearby waiting room TV. "Mum says you did CPR like she does at work." "I tried," Sarah Sterling whispered, her corporate persona cracking further. I couldn't let him." She stopped, composing herself. "Your father saved my life. I had to try to save his." Sarah Morrison's expression softened slightly. As a nurse herself, she recognized the genuine concern in the CEO's voice. "The doctors say he'll recover?" "Yes," Sarah Sterling stood, professional calm reasserting itself. "I've arranged for the best pulmonary specialist in the city. Dr. Harrison will be here within the hour." A young doctor emerged from Jack's room, flipping through charts on his tablet. "He's stabilizing nicely. The oxygen levels in his blood are improving and—" He paused, looking between the two Sarahs. "Family can go in now, 2 at a time." Sarah Sterling stepped back, watching Jack's wife and daughter disappear into his room. Through the door's window, she saw Emma carefully place her science project on the bedside table, arranging it so it would be the first thing Jack saw when he woke up. Outside the hospital, the media circus was growing. News vans lined the street, their reporters delivering live updates about the firefighter who saved a CEO and the CEO who saved him back. Smartphones still circulated Jessica Chen's video, along with stills of Sarah Sterling's transformation from corporate executive to emergency responder. Inside room 1042, machines beeped steadily, measuring Jack Morrison's gradual return to consciousness. Sarah Sterling found herself studying his vital signs through the window, remembering how it felt to count compressions on his chest, to feel the desperate uncertainty of those moments before he took his first breath. David appeared at her elbow, tablet in hand as always. "The board is demanding an emergency meeting. Phillips is already talking to the press about the funding review, trying to get ahead of the story." "Cancel it." Sarah's voice was quiet but firm. "Cancel the funding review? Cancel everything." She turned to face her assistant, and David was struck by how different she looked, not just the soot-stained clothes and disheveled hair, but something in her eyes. "The funding review, the budget cuts, all of it, and get me the files on my father's original firefighter support initiative." "Sarah," David lowered his voice, glancing at the waiting room full of firefighters. The shareholders can wait." Sarah watched through the window as Emma Morrison carefully explained her science project to her unconscious father. "Some things are more important than quarterly profits." The heart monitor in Jack's room continued its steady rhythm, each beep a reminder of how close they'd come to a different outcome. Sarah Sterling, known throughout the corporate world for her pragmatic decision-making, found herself facing a different kind of choice. In her pocket, her phone buzzed constantly with messages from board members and reporters. On the waiting room TV, financial analysts debated the impact of her actions on Sterling Enterprises' stock price. But for perhaps the first time in her career, Sarah Sterling wasn't thinking about stock prices or shareholder value. She was thinking about a firefighter who didn't hesitate to save her, even knowing she might have cut his department's funding. About a little girl arranging a science project for a father who had promised to help her finish it. About what her own father had understood about community and corporate responsibility. Lessons she had somehow forgotten in the relentless pursuit of profit. "David," she said quietly, still watching through the window, "we're going to do things differently from now on." Her assistant nodded, recognizing the tone she used when making decisions that would reshape the company's future. As he turned to leave, Sarah Sterling remained at her post outside room 1042, standing guard over the man who had saved her life, and in doing so, might have saved something in her as well. Sterling Enterprises board meeting minutes would record it as an unprecedented interruption of standard protocols, but the video footage told a more human story. The emergency board meeting, hastily convened in a borrowed conference room at Mount Sinai Hospital, revealed a Sarah Sterling that few had ever seen. "The funding review is suspended indefinitely," Sarah announced to the assembled board members, some attending virtually, their faces floating on tablets propped around the table. She was still wearing her smoke-damaged suit, though someone had brought her a fresh blouse. "And, before anyone objects, you should know this isn't a request. It's a notification." James Phillips, joining remotely from the London office, leaned closer to his camera. "Sarah, be reasonable. The stock has already dropped 6 points since that video went viral. Shareholders are demanding—" "Shareholders," Sarah interrupted, her voice carrying the same authority she'd used giving CPR orders, "will understand that some values transcend quarterly reports." She gestured to David, who distributed thick folders marked Richard Sterling Initiative, 1985. 40 years ago, my father understood something we've forgotten. Corporate responsibility isn't just a PR strategy, it's a moral imperative. Today, I watched a man nearly die saving my life, knowing full well that I was planning to cut his department's funding. Miranda Chen, head of communications, cleared her throat. "The optics are actually quite favorable, Sarah. Public sentiment is overwhelmingly positive. If we frame this correctly, this isn't about optics, Miranda." Sarah's hands pressed flat against the conference table. "This is about a firefighter's daughter showing me her science project while her father fights for his life in the next room. This is about remembering why my father started this initiative in the first place." The boardroom fell silent. Sarah's gaze swept across the faces before her, both physical and virtual. "I've spent the morning reviewing our historical data. In the years since we began reducing municipal support, our crisis response costs have actually increased. We're saving pennies on prevention and spending dollars on disaster recovery." William Chen, her father's old friend, spoke up for the first time. "Richard always said community investment was the best insurance policy a corporation could have." "Exactly," Sarah nodded, pulling up figures on the room's display screen. "Our current trajectory is unsustainable, not just morally, but financially. I'm proposing a complete restructuring of our community engagement model, starting with full restoration of the fire department funding." Phillips's face reddened on his video feed. "The shareholders will never—" "The shareholders," Sarah cut in, "are welcome to review my father's original data. Our highest periods of sustained growth coincided with our strongest community investment initiatives." "This isn't charity, James. It's smart business." David discreetly placed a note in front of her. "Jack Morrison awake, asking for you." Sarah paused, her father's words echoing in her memory. Profit isn't just about numbers. She understood that, now in a way she never had before. "I'll make this simple," she addressed the board. "Today's events have made one thing clear. We've lost our way. The Sterling enterprises my father built understood that corporate success and community welfare are inseparable. I'm not asking for permission to restore that vision. I'm telling you how it's going to be." She stood, gathering her files. "David, we'll distribute the complete proposal. I expect your full support in presenting this to the shareholders. And James," she looked directly into the camera feeding to London, "if you're thinking of calling for a vote of no confidence, remember that the public just watched me perform CPR on a firefighter. How do you think that vote would play in the press?" The silence that followed her exit was broken only by William Chen's quiet chuckle. "Richard would be proud," he murmured, though Sarah was already gone. In the hospital corridor, Sarah's phone buzzed with market updates and news alerts. Sterling Enterprises stock had stabilized, the initial panic selling offset by a surge of positive public sentiment. Sterling Cares was trending nationally, with thousands sharing stories of corporate responsibility and community impact. But Sarah's attention was focused solely on room 1042, where Jack Morrison had finally opened his eyes. The board meeting minutes would note her abrupt departure as CEO Sterling left to attend to urgent matters related to this morning's incident. What they wouldn't record was how Sarah Sterling, still in her smoke-stained clothes, paused outside Jack's room to wipe away tears before entering. Some transformations, it seemed, couldn't be captured in corporate minutes or shareholder reports. The real story was written in the way Sarah's hand shook as she knocked on Jack's door, in the moment of understanding that passed between rescuer and rescued, and in the quiet promise she made to herself, Sterling Enterprises would never again forget the true cost of corporate decisions. Behind her, David was already fielding calls from board members and shareholders, managing the corporate chaos she'd unleashed. But for Sarah Sterling, the only numbers that mattered now were the steady, vital signs on Jack Morrison's monitor. Each beat a reminder of why some investments couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. The steady hiss of oxygen and rhythmic beeping of monitors formed a quiet symphony in room 1042. Jack Morrison's first clear thought was of his daughter's science project, volcanic reactions in baking soda. The second was a confused memory of Sarah Sterling counting chest compressions over him. "Welcome back, Captain Morrison." The voice was familiar, though softer than he remembered from budget meetings. Sarah Sterling sat in the visitor's chair, her usual corporate armor stripped away by exhaustion and residual worry. "You did CPR?" Jack's voice was raspy from smoke and intubation. "Saw it on the news." He gestured weakly toward the muted TV, where footage of their shared ordeal played, on endless loop. "I did." Sarah leaned forward, her expression unusually vulnerable. "Though I haven't had to use that skill since my hospital volunteering days in college, almost 30 years ago." Jack attempted a smile, wincing at the pull of the oxygen mask. "A good technique. Our department's training officers I would approve." "I had excellent motivation." Sarah's hands clasped tightly in her lap. "You saved my life, Captain Morrison. You carried me out of there knowing your oxygen was critically low, knowing that I was about to cut your department's funding." "Jack," he corrected, his breath fogging the mask. "After today, think you can call me Jack?" A nurse entered to check his vitals, tutting at his attempt to talk. Sarah watched the medical professional work, remembering her own days of hospital volunteering, before MBAs and board meetings had replaced bedside manner with bottom lines. "Your daughter showed me her science project," Sarah said once they were alone again. "She's quite the young scientist, reminds me of myself at that age, before—" She trailed off, gesturing vaguely at her smoke-stained designer suit. "Before corporate life?" Jack's voice was growing stronger. "Before spreadsheets replaced people." The directness of his question, free from accusation but heavy with truth, made Sarah flinch. "Yes, though today has been enlightening in that regard." She stood, moving to the window. Manhattan's skyline stretched before them, including the still visible smoke damage on Sterling Enterprises building. "I just came from an emergency board meeting. I've suspended all planned cuts to municipal services funding. In fact, I'm reinstating my father's original community support initiative, full funding plus an additional endowment for first responder family support." Jack's monitor registered a slight spike in his heart rate. "Why?" Sarah turned back to face him, her professional mask cracking further. "Because today I watched a man risk his life to save mine, knowing I was probably going to make his job harder. Because I saw his daughter carefully arrange a science project by his hospital bed, waiting for him to wake up and help her finish it. Because—" She paused, gathering thoughts that felt far removed from quarterly reports and shareholder value. "Because my father understood something I forgot somewhere along the way. Community isn't a line item. People aren't budget adjustments. Your father," Jack's voice carried recognition, "Richard Sterling, he used to visit our station, knew every firefighter's name." "He did," Sarah smiled sadly. "He believed corporate success was meaningless without community welfare. Somewhere Along the way, I lost sight of that. Today was a rather dramatic reminder. Jack shifted in his bed, watching her carefully. Dramatic enough to make a CEO do CPR on a sidewalk, in a designer suit no less. Sarah's attempt at humor faded quickly. I've never been so terrified in my life, not during the fire, not during the rescue, but watching you collapse, knowing you'd sacrificed your safety. And for mine, it changed something, in me, in how I see everything. The medical bill on Jack's side table caught her eye, another reality of the system she'd helped create. Without a word, she picked it up, folded it carefully, and tucked it into her pocket. "Ms. Sterling," Jack began. "Sarah," she corrected. "After today, I think you can call me Sarah." "Sarah," he managed a real smile this time. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." Her voice carried the same authority it had when directing his CPR, but tempered now with genuine emotion. "I'm not doing this out of guilt or obligation, Jack. I'm doing it because it's right, because it's what Sterling Enterprises should have been doing all along." A commotion in the hallway announced the arrival of Emma, bursting into the room with fresh baking soda for her science project. She stopped short at the sight of Sarah Sterling, still in her smoke-stained suit. "Did you help Daddy?" Emma asked. Again, this time with the directness only children can manage. Sarah knelt to the girl's level, just as she had in the waiting room. "Your daddy helped me first. He's a hero. And now maybe I can help him too. Help all the firefighters and their families. By not cutting their money?" Emma's question carried an innocence that made both adults wince. "By remembering what really matters," Sarah answered, standing to gather her things. "Jack, take whatever time you need to recover. Your job, all the department jobs, are secure. More than secure. And Emma," she paused at the door, "make sure you show your dad that volcano reaction. I have a feeling he's been looking forward to it." As Sarah Sterling walked down the hospital corridor, her phone already buzzing with corporate fallout, she felt lighter than she had in years. Sometimes it took nearly losing everything to remember what really mattered. She touched the folded medical bill in her pocket, a tangible reminder of the changes to come. Behind her, the sound of Emma explaining her science project to Jack drifted. From room 1042, a simple moment between father and daughter that no budget line could ever quantify. Sarah Sterling's resignation letter sat half-finished on her temporary desk in the hospital's administrative wing. The words glowed on her laptop screen. "After careful consideration, I find myself at a crossroads." She'd started and abandoned it 3 times now, each attempt feeling more inadequate than the last. The board members are assembled in conference. "Ruby," David announced, tablet in hand as always. "Phillips had his team prepare a counter-proposal to your community initiative. They're calling it measured philanthropy." Sarah closed the resignation letter draft without saving it. "Measured philanthropy," she repeated, tasting the corporate doublespeak. How convenient. The walk to conference room B took her past room 1042, where Jack Morrison was sitting up now, helping Emma with her science project despite the nurses' protests. The sight strengthened her resolve. Some decisions required more than measured responses. She entered the conference room like she had countless times before, but everything felt different. The board members' faces, both present and on video screens, watched her with a mixture of concern and calculation. Phillips, still streaming from London, sat forward in his chair, digital papers arranged before him like weapons. "Before we begin," Phillips started, "I think we can all agree that emotions have been running high. The market's initial reaction has stabilized," Sarah cut in, taking her place at the head of the table. "In fact, our public approval rating is at a 15-year high. But that's not why we're here." She nodded to David, who distributed new folders to everyone present. "What you're looking at is the complete Richard Sterling Community Investment Initiative, including 30 years of data on its impact on both corporate growth and community welfare." "Sarah," Miranda Chen interjected, "the PR team has drafted A wonderful narrative about corporate responsibility and community engagement. We can control this story. This isn't about controlling stories, Miranda. It's about writing a new one. Sarah stood, commanding the room's attention. For years, we've treated community support as a marketing expense, something to be optimized and trimmed. Today showed me how wrong we've been. Philip's voice crackled through the speakers. With all due respect, Sarah, one emotional incident shouldn't dictate corporate policy. The shareholders. Sarah's voice carried the same quiet authority she'd found performing CPR, invested in Sterling Enterprises because of what we stand for. My father built this company on the principle that corporate success and community welfare are inseparable. Today, I watched that principle save my life. She moved to the window, the same Manhattan skyline visible, but somehow changed. Jack Morrison carried me out of that building, knowing we were planning to cut his department's funding. He didn't hesitate, didn't calculate the cost-benefit ratio. He simply did what was right. That's his job, Phillips argued. What we're discussing is responsible corporate governance. Sarah turned back to the room, her expression hardened with certainty. No, James. What we're discussing is the difference between governance and leadership. I've drafted a comprehensive proposal for the new Sterling Community Foundation. It will be independently funded, starting with a personal contribution of 20% of my Sterling shares. The room erupted in protests and exclamations. Phillips looked like he might short-circuit his video feed. You can't. I can and I will. Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. Furthermore, the Foundation's first initiative will be a comprehensive support program for first responder families, education funds, medical coverage, housing assistance, everything my father envisioned, but we gradually stripped away. William Chen, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. Richard always said the true measure of corporate success wasn't stock price, but community impact. Exactly. Sarah smiled at her father's old friend. And to ensure this initiative's success, I'm stepping down as CEO. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Philip seemed stunned, speechless. I'll remain as chairman of the board, Sarah continued into the quiet, but my primary focus will be directing the foundation. It's time for Sterling Enterprises to remember its roots, its purpose, and it's time for me to remember mine. She drew out Jack's medical bill from her pocket, unfolding it carefully. This morning, I watched a man nearly die, saving my life. His daughter showed me her science project while waiting for him to wake up. His wife, a nurse, works double shifts to make ends meet. And all this time, we've been discussing cutting the funding that keeps them safe, that helps their families survive. Sarah placed the bill on the conference table. This ends today. The Foundation's first act will be establishing a comprehensive support fund for Station 57, followed by a city-wide program rollout. David has the complete proposal for your review, but I want to be clear. This isn't a suggestion. This is happening. And if we object? Philip's voice was tight with controlled anger. Sarah smiled, the same smile that had won countless corporate battles. Then I take my shares, my father's legacy, and this story to the press. I'm sure they'd be fascinated by the board's opposition to supporting the firefighters who, as of this morning, are being hailed as heroes across social media. The threat hung in the air, elegant in its simplicity. Sarah had spent decades mastering corporate warfare. She knew when she held the winning hand. Now, she gathered her papers. If you'll excuse me, I promised a young girl I'd watch her science project demonstration. David will walk you through the proposal details. I trust you'll make the right decision. As she left the conference room, Sarah felt the weight of years of corporate compromise falling away. Her father's portrait seemed to smile as she passed, or maybe it was just the afternoon light. Either way, for the first time in longer than she could remember, Sarah Sterling knew exactly who she was and what she had to do. News headlines cascaded across screens throughout Manhattan. each one adding another layer to the story that had captured the nation's attention. Sterling CEO performs. CPR on firefighter, a corporate leader's transformation. From budget cuts to life-saving, Sarah Sterling's dramatic change of heart. Viral. Video shows human side of corporate America. Sterling Enterprises announces major community investment initiative. In the hospital's private wing, Sarah Sterling watched the coverage with a mixture of amusement and discomfort. The morning shows were running the CPR footage on endless loop, interspersed with clips from her father's original community investment announcements decades ago. "They're calling you the CEO who cares," David reported, scrolling through social media updates. The video has over 10 million views now. Sterling Cares is still trending. "What about the stock price?" Sarah asked, more out of habit than concern. "Up 3 points since your foundation announcement. Apparently social responsibility is good for business." David's slight smile suggested he'd known this all along. Outside, the media circus showed. No signs of dispersing. News vans lined the hospital entrance, reporters hoping to catch a glimpse of either Sarah or Jack. Local stations had begun running special segments on firefighter funding and corporate responsibility. Sterling Enterprises' dramatic shift in policy raises questions about the role of corporate America in community welfare. One anchor intoned seriously. Sources inside the company confirm that CEO Sarah Sterling has committed personal assets to the new foundation, marking a significant departure from traditional corporate philanthropy models. The story had struck a chord that went beyond corporate news. Morning show hosts debated the implications over coffee. Social media erupted with similar stories of first responder heroism, and corporate leaders across the country faced questions about their own community investment policies. "Look at this." David turned his tablet towards Sarah. The screen showed a compilation of social media posts. "My brother's a firefighter. Finally, someone in corporate America gets it. Actually, Sterling Cares. Watch that CEO do CPR in her designer suit. Most real thing I've seen from a corporate leader. Ever. Hey, other companies, your move. Corporate responsibility." Sarah's phone buzzed, with a text from Miranda Chen. Requests for interviews pouring in. Today show, "Good Morning America, 60 Minutes, all want exclusives." She typed back a simple response. "No interviews until Jack Morrison is fully recovered and his family approves." The media narrative was already spinning beyond her control, but in a way she hadn't expected. Rather than focusing on the dramatic rescue or her CPR response, many outlets had begun digging into Sterling Enterprises' history of community involvement under her father's leadership. "Richard Sterling's legacy lives on," declared one headline, accompanied by archive footage of her father chatting with firefighters at Station 57's annual Community Day. The contrast with recent corporate policies was stark and telling. A soft knock at her temporary office door interrupted her thoughts. Emma Morrison stood there, clutching a newspaper with the viral photo on its front page. "My teacher showed this to our whole class," Emma announced, spreading the paper on Sarah's desk. "She says you're teaching corporations how to have a heart." Sarah smiled, remembering how her own father had balanced corporate leadership with human connection. "I think your daddy taught me that lesson, Emma. I just needed a reminder." Outside her window, another news crew was setting up for a live shot. The reporter's voice carried faintly through the glass. "In a time when corporate responsibility often feels like an oxymoron, the events at Sterling Enterprises raise an important question. What is the true cost of prioritizing profits over people?" Sarah touched the window lightly, watching the media circus below. The story had become something larger than a dramatic rescue or a CEO's moment of crisis. It had tapped into a deeper narrative about corporate America's relationship with the communities it served. Her phone buzzed again. More interview requests, more board members wanting to discuss the foundation, more corporate leaders reaching out to understand the sudden shift in policy. But Sarah's attention was drawn back to Emma, who was now describing her completed science project with enthusiastic detail. The real story, Sarah realized, wasn't in the headlines or viral videos. It was in the small moments of human connection that no corporate policy could quantify. The media could spin this however they wanted. She knew exactly why she'd made her choice. The foundation proposal document lay open on Jack Morrison's hospital tray table, its glossy pages reflecting the afternoon light. Sarah Sterling sat in the visitor's chair, watching his expression as he read through the details of what would become the Sterling First Responders Support Initiative. This is Jack paused, searching for words. A lot. His voice was stronger now, though still rough from smoke inhalation. The oxygen tube beneath his nose remained a stark reminder of recent events. "It's necessary," Sarah replied, noting how he lingered on the section about educational support for first responders' children, and long overdue. Jack turned another page, his firefighters' calloused hands incongruous against the corporate letterhead. 20 million in initial funding? Personal shares contributed? He looked up, meeting her eyes. Why? The question hung between them, weighted with more than just financial implications. Sarah leaned forward, choosing her words carefully. "When I was performing CPR on you, counting compressions, watching for any sign of response, I realized something. Every day, you and your colleagues make split-second decisions to save lives without calculating the cost. It's time someone did the same for you. We don't do it for recognition." Jack's protest was quiet but firm. "Or for reward." "No," Sarah agreed. "You do it because it's right. That's exactly why this matters." She stood, moving to the window, where Engine 57 was visible in the distance, returning from another call. "My father understood this. He built relationships with stations across the city, knew firefighters by name, understood their families' needs." "I remember," Jack nodded. "He used to bring coffee to our overnight shifts, knew how my daughter Emma took her hot chocolate." Sarah turned back to face him. "Somewhere along the way, we lost that connection. We started seeing numbers instead of people. I want to fix that, Jack, but I need your help." "My help?" His skepticism was evident. "I'm just a captain. You're exactly who we need." Sarah pulled out another document, this one showing the Foundation's proposed leadership structure. "I want you on the board as our first responder liaison and program director." Jack's heart monitor registered a slight spike. "Ms. Sterling, Sarah." "Sarah," he corrected himself. "I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I'm a firefighter, not a foundation director. I belong on Engine 57, not in a boardroom." "Why not both?" Sarah pressed. "Who better to guide these programs than someone who understands exactly what first responder families need? Someone who's lived it?" She watched as he glanced at Emma's science project, still proudly displayed on his bedside table. The educational support program alone would help hundreds of children like Emma. Think about what that could mean for families struggling to make ends meet on a firefighter's salary. Jack was quiet for a long moment, studying the proposal again. This kind of change, it'll face resistance. Corporate boards, shareholders. "Let me worry about the corporate politics," Sarah interrupted. "I've been handling boardroom fires for decades. What I need is someone who understands the real ones, someone who can ensure these programs actually help the people they're meant to serve." She sat again, her corporate polish softening. "When you carried me out of that building, you didn't stop to consider that I was planning to cut your funding. You just did what was right. Now, it's my turn." Jack's wife, Sarah, appeared in the doorway carrying fresh flowers. She paused, sensing the weight of the conversation. "The Foundation needs both of you," Sarah Sterling continued, including Mrs. Morrison in her gaze. "A firefighter's perspective and a nurse's insight. Help me build something that really works for first responder families." The other Sarah moved to her husband's bedside, picking up the proposal. Her eyes widened as she read. This educational support program, Emma's college fund, would be fully covered. Sarah Sterling confirmed, along with medical benefits, housing assistance, family support services. Everything my father envisioned, but more comprehensive, more real. Jack and his wife exchanged a look that spoke volumes about years of financial struggle and sacrificed dreams. Finally, he turned back to Sarah. No corporate interference, he asked. Full autonomy to develop programs based on real needs. You'll have direct access to me and the foundation board, Sarah promised. No filters, no corporate layers. Just genuine support for the people who risk everything to keep others safe. Jack picked up the proposal one more time. His decision written in the set of his shoulders. Then I guess we have work to do. The first Sterling Foundation grant carried both Jack Morrison's signature and Sarah Sterling's, the formal letterhead bearing their new shared mission statement, supporting those who support us all. 1 month after the fire, they sat together in the Foundation's newly established offices, reviewing applications from first responder families across the city. Another one for the Education Fund, Jack noted, passing a file across the desk. FDNY Lieutenant Garcia's daughter, accepted to medical school, but they're struggling with the tuition. Sarah reviewed the application, remembering her father's words about investment in community. Approved. Have them expedite the processing. Classes start next month. The Foundation's launch had moved with unprecedented speed, driven by Sarah's corporate efficiency and Jack's practical understanding of first responder needs. What began as a simple idea in a hospital room had evolved into a comprehensive support system. Station 23's roof repair is complete, Sarah reported, checking updates on her tablet. And the childcare center at Station 57 opens next week. Emma's already volunteered to help with the younger kids after school. Jack smiled, thinking of his daughter's enthusiasm for the Foundation's work. Her science project Volcano now sat proudly displayed in the Foundation's reception area, a reminder of where this all began. The housing assistance program is making a difference, he added. 3 families approved for mortgage refinancing last week. One of them was about to lose their home. Sarah nodded, remembering the unopened foreclosure notice she'd glimpsed on Jack's kitchen counter that fateful morning. Some problems were easier to solve than others, but each solution rippled outward, strengthening the community they served. The Foundation's first month had brought unexpected challenges and surprising allies. Other corporations, inspired by Sterling's example, had begun reaching out about establishing similar programs. Sarah found herself conducting workshops on corporate responsibility, while Jack spoke at fire stations about the available support services. Chief Roberts called, Jack mentioned, sorting through more applications. The new training equipment we funded is already improving response times. He says it's like Christmas came early. Sarah paused in her work, watching Jack review applications. With the same care he brought to fire scene assessment, his recovery had been remarkably quick, though he still carried an emergency inhaler, a reminder of that day's cost and catalyst. The board meeting went well yesterday, she offered. Phillips actually smiled when I showed him the public approval ratings. Turns out doing the right thing is good for business. Their working relationship had found an easy rhythm. Corporate expertise blending with frontline experience. Jack's practical knowledge helped shape programs that actually worked for first responder families, while Sarah's business acumen ensured their sustainability. A knock at the door interrupted their review. Miranda Chen entered, carrying fresh polling data. The latest community impact numbers are in. Approval ratings are at historic highs, and the Foundation's first initiatives are generating significant positive coverage. That's not why we're doing this, Jack and Sarah spoke simultaneously, then shared a knowing look. Some lessons once learned stuck deep. Miranda smiled, used to their shared perspective now. Of course not. But it helps with expanding the programs. 3 more companies have committed to matching funds for the education initiative. After she left, Sarah stood and walked to the window. From this height, she could see both Sterling Enterprises' corporate offices and Station 57. The two buildings, once representing opposing forces in her mind, now seemed complementary, pieces of a larger purpose. "Your father would be proud," Jack said quietly, following her gaze. "This is what he meant by community investment, isn't it?" Sarah nodded, thinking of the portrait that still watched over Sterling Enterprises' executive floor. He understood. Something I had to learn the hard way. Success isn't just about profit margins. "Sometimes it's about science projects and hot chocolate," Jack suggested, referencing her father's old visits to the station. "And about remembering that every budget line represents real people," Sarah agreed. She turned back to their work, to the stack of applications representing families they could help. "Speaking of which, let's finish reviewing these before the Foundation board meeting." As they returned to their task, Sarah caught sight of their reflection in the window. Corporate, leader and firefighter, working side by side to build something meaningful. The viral video of her performing CPR still circulated occasionally, but the real story was here, in the quiet work of turning crisis into opportunity, of transforming corporate responsibility from slogan to reality. Outside, Engine 57's siren wailed as it responded to another call, its sound now carrying a different meaning for Sarah. Every emergency response represented not just a crisis, but a reminder of why their work mattered, and of how a single moment of human connection could cascade into lasting change. The anonymous letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, its pristine white envelope stark against the Foundation's polished conference table. "Your bleeding heart will bankrupt this company," it read. "Not everyone has forgotten that corporations exist to make profit, not play charity." Sarah Sterling set the letter aside, adding it to a growing stack of similar messages. Most came from within Sterling Enterprises' old guard, executives who viewed the Foundation as a threat to traditional corporate values. Some, like this one, carried darker undertones. "Another one?" Jack asked from the doorway, his firefighter's instinct for trouble still sharp despite his part-time Foundation duties. "They're getting creative," Sarah replied, trying to maintain her usual composure. "This one suggests, 'I've lost my corporate edge. Apparently, compassion is a sign of weakness.'" The Foundation's success had bred opposition from unexpected quarters. Corporate competitors whispered about hidden agendas and PR stunts. Some shareholders questioned the allocation of resources. Even within the first responder community, certain administrators worried about corporate influence in public services. Station 12's application was denied, Jack reported, settling into his chair. "Third time this month their chief has blocked a family from accepting Foundation support. Claims it creates inappropriate dependencies." Sarah understood the resistance. Change, even positive change, threatened established power structures. But knowing the source of opposition didn't make it easier to watch families refuse help they desperately needed. "There's more," Jack continued, his expression troubled. "Someone's been spreading rumors at the stations, suggesting that accepting Foundation support might lead to corporate takeover of emergency services." Before Sarah could respond, David burst into the conference room, tablet displaying urgent news alerts. "You need to see this," he announced, queuing up a financial news segment. On screen, James Phillips sat in a London studio, his expression grave. "While the Sterling Foundation's intentions may be admirable," he intoned, "we must question the wisdom of diverting significant corporate resources into what amounts to a personal passion project. Sources inside Sterling Enterprises suggest that traditional business operations are suffering. Traditional business operations are up 12%, Sarah interrupted the recording. "He knows that. Everyone knows that." "It's not about facts," Jack observed quietly. "It's about narrative. Same thing happens in the department when people resist new safety protocols. They're not fighting the change itself. They're fighting what it represents." Sarah stood, moving to the window where she could see both her worlds, the corporate skyline and the scattered fire stations serving it. "What we're doing matters," she stated, more to herself than the others. "It's already making a difference." Miss Sterling? Her assistant's voice carried concern. There's something else. The media's running a story about Emma Morrison's school, performance dropping since Captain Morrison took the foundation position. They're suggesting the foundation is disrupting first responder families rather than helping them. Jack's expression hardened. His daughter's struggles with the public attention had been private family matter, until now. Emma's science project won first place, he said quietly. She's just having trouble with all the attention. Sarah felt a familiar corporate steel enter her spine. She'd spent decades in boardroom battles, but this felt different. This was personal, not just for her, but for every family the foundation supported. Enough, she decided, turning from the window. David, call Miranda. It's time we changed the narrative. Jack, get me the impact reports, real numbers, real families helped, and find out who leaked Emma's school information. No one targets children in this fight. What's the plan? Jack recognized her battlefield tone. We do what we should have done from the start. Total transparency. Every success story, every family helped, every dollar spent. Let them attack the foundation. We'll respond with results. She picked up the anonymous letter, crumpling it deliberately. And we'll show them exactly what corporate edge looks like when it's fighting for something that matters. David was already making calls, his tablet lighting up with media contacts. Jack studied Sarah's expression, seeing not the corporate leader who had once reviewed budget cuts, but the woman who had performed CPR on a sidewalk without hesitation. They'll push back harder, he warned. Phillips has allies on the board. Let them push, Sarah replied, her voice carrying the same determination it had during the rescue. Some things are worth fighting for. Your daughter taught me that, showing me her science project while we waited for you to wake up. Outside the foundation offices, Manhattan's endless rhythm continued. Sirens wailing, corporations trading, lives intersecting. But in that conference room, a new kind of corporate battle plan was taking shape. Not for profit or market share, but for the simple idea that doing right by people was its own kind of success. The anonymous letter's ashes fell into the wastebasket, its threat transformed into fuel for the fight ahead. The social media post that changed everything came from an unexpected source. Emma Morrison, frustrated by the attacks on her father and the foundation, had taken matters into her own hands. Using her mother's phone, she posted a simple video that cut through the corporate noise. Hi, I'm Emma. My dad's a firefighter who almost died saving someone's life. Now he helps other firefighter families like ours. Some people say that's wrong. But yesterday, my friend Katie's mom, who's a paramedic, got help paying for Katie's insulin. Last week, firefighter Rodriguez's son got to stay in college because of the foundation. That's not wrong. That's what heroes do. They help people. The video, shot in front of her science fair volcano project, went viral within hours. What Heroes Do started trending, spawning thousands of similar stories from first responder families across the city. Did you approve this? Sarah asked Jack, watching the view count climb past 1 million. Found out about it same time you did, he replied. Pride, mixing with parental concern. Emma's got her mother's spirit, and maybe a bit of your corporate instincts. The response was immediate and overwhelming. First responder families began sharing their own foundation stories. My husband's been fighting fires for 20 years. First time we've felt secure about our kids' future. What Heroes Do, Sterling Foundation helped us keep our house after my injury. That's not charity, that's community. What Heroes Do, watching my daughter graduate medical school next month. Thank you, Sterling Foundation, for making her dream possible. What Heroes Do. Even Station 12's resistant chief couldn't ignore the wave of support. His own firefighters' families had begun speaking out, sharing stories of how the foundation had touched their lives. Corporate America took notice. CEOs who had been watching from the sidelines began reaching out. Sarah's phone buzzed constantly with messages from industry leaders wanting to learn more about the Foundation's model. Morgan Stanley just announced their own first responder support initiative, David reported, scrolling through updates. Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan are following suit. They're calling it the Sterling Standard for Corporate Responsibility. The tide turned decisively when Richard Sterling's old friend, William Chen, gave a powerful interview about the Foundation's origins. This isn't about PR or profits, he explained. This is about returning to what Richard Sterling understood decades ago, that corporations have a responsibility to the communities they serve. Sarah hasn't lost her corporate edge. She's redefined what that edge should cut through. Phillips's opposition crumbled as other board members publicly aligned with the Foundation. His final attempt to challenge the initiative died quietly in committee, overshadowed by a wave of positive press and soaring approval ratings. But the real victory came in smaller moments. Emma's science teacher created a special unit on community impact, using the Foundation as a case study. Station 57's new childcare center became a model for similar programs across the city. First responder families began offering their own expertise to help others navigate available resources. Sarah found Jack in the Foundation's office late one evening, reviewing new applications with the same care he once gave to emergency calls. Emma's video, she said thoughtfully. It did what all our corporate communications couldn't. It made it real. That's because it was real, Jack replied. No PR spin, no corporate messaging, just the truth about what we're doing here. Through the window, they could see lights blazing in corporate offices across Manhattan. But now other lights caught their attention. Emergency vehicles heading out on calls, carrying first responders who no longer had to choose between serving their community and supporting their families. Your father would have loved this, Jack added quietly. Not just the Foundation, but how it's spreading, how it's changing how other companies think. Sarah nodded, remembering her father's lessons about corporate responsibility. He always said, true leadership isn't about maintaining power, it's about empowering others. Outside, Emma's What Heroes Do continued to trend, each news story reinforcing what Sarah had learned that day on the sidewalk, performing CPR on a firefighter who had saved her life. Sometimes the most powerful corporate strategy was simply doing what was right and letting that example lead the way. The new fire department budget lay open on the Foundation's conference table, its numbers telling a story of transformation. 6 months after the fire that had changed everything, Sarah Sterling and Jack Morrison sat reviewing the results of their shared vision. Every station in the city now has full funding for equipment upgrades, Jack noted, his finger tracing down the columns. Response times are down 12%. Training accidents have been cut in half. Sarah nodded, remembering the cramped equipment room she'd seen during her first station visit after the fire. And the family support programs? 100%. Participation rate, Jack smiled, pulling up another report. Even Station 12's chief finally came around after his grandson got that scholarship. Says he was wrong about corporate interference. The Foundation's impact had exceeded even Sarah's ambitious projections. Sterling Enterprises' stock had hit record highs, proving that corporate responsibility and profitability weren't mutually exclusive. More importantly, the human impact was visible in countless small victories. Katie's mom sent this, Jack said, passing over a photo. It showed his daughter Emma and her friend Katie at a school science fair, both grinning proudly beside their projects. Says she doesn't have to work double shifts anymore to afford Katie's insulin. The medical coverage program changed everything for them. Sarah studied the photo, remembering the morning she'd first seen Emma's science project in Jack's hospital room. How is Emma doing with all of this? Back to straight A's, Jack chuckled. Turns out she's thinking about corporate law now. Says, somebody needs to help other companies learn to do the right thing. Their conversation was interrupted by David's arrival with the latest Foundation metrics. The housing assistance program just helped its 100th family avoid foreclosure, he reported. And the child care centers are operating at full capacity. We're already getting requests to expand the model to police and EMT stations. Sarah rose and walked to the window, where she could see the repaired Sterling Enterprises building standing proud against the Manhattan skyline. The smoke damage had long since been cleared away, but the lessons of that day remained, etched into corporate policy and community action. The board meeting is in an hour, David reminded her. They're expecting the quarterly impact report. Tell them to look out their windows, Sarah replied. The impact is visible on every street, in every emergency response, in every first responder family that no longer has to choose between service and survival. Jack joined her at the window, his reflection showing a man transformed not just by near tragedy, but by the opportunity to help others avoid the struggles he'd known. You know, when you first proposed this foundation, I thought it was just corporate guilt talking. And now I think your father would be proud, not just of the foundation, but of how you've changed the conversation about corporate responsibility. The foundation's success had sparked a movement across corporate America. Companies that had once competed solely for market share now vied to demonstrate their community impact. The Sterling Standard had become a benchmark for corporate citizenship. Sarah's, a phone buzzed with a message from Phillips in London. 6 months ago, it might have been a criticism or challenge. Now it was a request to consult on a similar program for British first responders. We're not just helping families anymore, Sarah realized. We're changing how business thinks about community and how communities think about business, Jack added. He picked up the new budget document, its pages representing not just numbers, but lives improved. Ready to go show the board what real corporate success looks like. Sarah gathered her materials, including Emma's latest school photo, now proudly displayed alongside her father's portrait in the Sterling Enterprises lobby. The image of a young girl who had reminded a corporate leader about what really mattered. "You know," she said as they headed to the boardroom, "sometimes I think about that day. About carrying me out of the fire, about doing CPR on the sidewalk, about how close we came to a very different outcome. And I realize that some fires have to burn away the old to make room for something better." She smiled, remembering her father's words about corporate responsibility. We just had to remember what better really means. The boardroom awaited them, its members now eager to hear about the Foundation's latest successes. Outside, sirens wailed as another crew responded to another emergency, but now they carried a different meaning, a reminder not of crisis, but of community, of connection, of corporate America finally remembering its heart. 1 year to the day, after the Sterling Enterprises fire, a photograph was taken on the steps of Station 57. In it, Sarah Sterling stood beside Jack Morrison, surrounded by firefighters and their families. But it wasn't the formal corporate photo op of years past. This time, Emma Morrison was showing Sarah her science fair trophy, while Katie proudly displayed her normal blood sugar readings. First responder children played in the background, watched over by staff from the station's daycare center. The station itself had been transformed. New equipment gleamed in the garage, training facilities had been modernized, and the community room, now named the Richard Sterling Memorial Hall, hosted regular gatherings for first responder families. "Hard to believe it's been a year," Jack remarked, watching a new recruit demonstrate the upgraded safety gear to a group of visiting corporate executives. These tours had become regular events as companies sought to understand and replicate the Sterling model. "Harder to believe how much has changed," Sarah replied. The numbers told part of the story. 28 new corporate foundations established nationwide, over 1,000 first responder families supported, and a complete transformation in how America's largest companies approached community responsibility. But the real changes were more personal. Sarah now spent as much time in firehouses as boardrooms, while Jack had discovered a talent for translating between corporate and community needs. Their unlikely partnership had become a template for bridging the gap between business and public service. Emma's science project Volcano still held pride of place in the Foundation's office, but now it was surrounded by photos of other success. Stories, graduates holding diplomas, families in front of newly secured homes, children receiving medical care they once couldn't afford. The anniversary gathering brought together people from both worlds, corporate leaders and first responders, board members and firefighters' families. Phillips had even flown in from London, his initial skepticism long since transformed into cautious admiration. "Your father's portrait in the lobby," Jack mentioned to Sarah as they watched the celebrations. "I noticed you added something to it," Sarah smiled. Beneath her father's image now hung the words that had started as a Foundation slogan, but had grown into a corporate movement. "Success isn't measured in profits alone, but in lives improved and communities strengthened." A call came in, and the gathered crowd paused to watch Engine 57 roll out. But now the scene carried a different weight. These weren't just firefighters responding to an emergency. They were parents whose children had college funds, homeowners, secure in their mortgages, professionals supported by their community. As the siren faded into the distance, Sarah caught sight of her reflection in the station's window. The corporate leader who had once prioritized profit margins above all else was gone, replaced by someone who had learned to measure success in smiles, in security, in lives transformed. "Ready for another year?" Jack asked, already reviewing plans for the Foundation's expansion. Sarah watched Emma teaching younger children about science projects, her future now as secure as her father's legacy. "Ready for as many years as it takes," she replied, knowing that some investments yielded returns that no quarterly report could capture. The thank you wall in the Sterling Foundation's lobby grew larger each month. Hundreds of letters, photos, and cards covered its surface, each telling a story of lives changed and hopes restored. But one item held the central spot, a simple handmade card showing a volcano experiment signed by Emma Morrison. Sarah Sterling often paused before this wall during her morning routine, remembering the day that had transformed not just her life, but an entire corporate culture. The viral video of her performing CPR had long since faded from public attention, replaced by countless stories of corporate responsibility and community impact. Jack Morrison still ran Station 57, balancing his duties as a firefighter with his role in the Foundation. His office there displayed both his captain's helmet and his Foundation Director's Award, symbols of a bridge built between two worlds that once seemed impossibly far apart. Emma had indeed pursued corporate law, her experiences inspiring a new generation to see business as a force for positive change. The science project that had once sat beside a hospital bed now inspired similar displays in corporate offices across the country. But perhaps the most telling change was visible in the quiet moments, in the peace of mind on firefighters' faces, as they responded to calls, in the proud smiles of their children pursuing dreams once thought impossible, and in the way Sarah Sterling now measured success, not in dollars and cents, but in lives touched and communities strengthened. Some lessons, it seemed, were worth the fire it took to learn them.